was the Blackhawks and Dominic Oobleck, who netted his 14th goal of the season. And unfortunately, it was in a loss. It was a 5-2 loss to the Nashville Predators.
Okay.
5-2 yesterday over on the west side. So we want to talk to our guy. I hadn't had him on in a while. We missed him, so we had to get him back on. He's from The-Rink official, and you can find him on Twitter with the best Twitter handle ever, @PuckinHostel. Let's welcome back to Shawn and Maya, Jeff Osborne. Jeff, what's going on, buddy? Thanks for your time.
Nothing much, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, our Blackhawks. My goodness. It's got to be, you cover these guys almost exclusively, so it's got to be a lot more frustrating for you than for us. 'Cause it's frustrating as hell for us, don't get me wrong, I'm talking about them. But what happened yesterday? Corey Crawford only faced 28 shots. So he wasn't getting peppered with 30, 35, 40 shots like him and Lehner had been peppered with this season. What happened yesterday, and how did they lose that game with only 28 shots against Crawford?
Well, there's a slim area for margin of mistakes with this team, and they just make a lot of mental mistakes. They can't afford to make those mistakes because when they do make the mistakes, they end up in the back of the net. So, Jonathan Toews turns one over. It goes off, it goes off of John Quenneville, and it ends up in the back of their net. And bad coverage, young players making mistakes, which is what they're going to do. So it's just, it's a whole cornucopia of things that come together, and they just basically this team is just not that good. They may win 1 or 2 in a row, but then they're going to go back to losing 2, 3 in a row. They don't have the horses and they don't have the fuel to make, the playoffs. They're just, a bottom third team.
And it sucks because, we had hopes this year that maybe they could, get in the playoffs, 7th or 8th seed. But they can't. It just doesn't seem like that's possible now. There's just so many different people break down every game. It's one person here, one person there, a bad shot here, a bad shot there. And all those add up to all these freaking losses. And it's frustrating because there's still talent on this team, but it seems like it's not being harnessed properly.
Yeah, well, I mean, they have a lot of young players. They have a lot of young talent, but they're all inexperienced players. I heard you mention Dominic Oobleck, and he's been a nice surprise. He's someone that basically Stan Bowman stole from the Kings. He's doing real well. He's, second in the league in rookie goal scoring. He's a good not peripheral player, but secondary scoring type player. He's going to be useful in the future, but again, he's going to be an RFA at the end of the year, so they're going to have to sign him up. But they really need to decide soon and get on the market and start letting teams know what players are available, so that then maybe they can bring some talent or some draft picks back, because it just clearly is not a playoff team. They would have to win 2 out of 3, maybe more, to even make it into the playoffs. And then really, do you want that? Where they've been playing playoff games for 2 months already, they're going to be exhausted. They're probably going to get stomped in the first round. And then what have you accomplished at that point? Not really anything.
I know that we've talked about this earlier, in the season, and it's interesting because to me, the Blackhawks are doing just the opposite of what the blueprint was when they won Stanley Cups, which was you had young players in Hayes and Kane, but they were surrounded by experienced veterans. Now they've done just the opposite, where there are veterans, but it isn't the same chemistry in regards to those young players aren't to that caliber of a Hayes and Kane. Hence, to expect the outcomes to be the same would make no sense. So I don't understand why there's this reluctancy to go into free agency and to bring back people that legitimately can help them be contenders and not put so much of the onus on these young players they're still learning, they're still green. Well, okay, but that's always going to equate into a loss at some point.
Yeah, well, it's a slightly different now than it was back then, because you have Jonathan Toews and you have Patrick Kane and you have Duncan Keith, who are these veterans who are, were elite veterans. They know the league, they know what they're doing. But back then, Jonathan Toews and those guys were those, generational players that were young coming up. The Blackhawks don't have those young generational players just yet. Maybe Kirby Dach. Maybe
I was going to ask you about him. Okay.
Yeah, maybe Adam Boquist, but you don't have any Toews and Kane level players just yet in that pipeline. So you've got the veterans, but you've got some really inexperienced young players, and it's just not enough. And plus, you don't have really much in the middle as fillers. You have a bunch of AHL players, and they don't have the depth. They just don't have the depth.
So if you're playing Bowman, let me ask this question: how is there any way to possibly retain this team as it is and consider winning? And if you feel that it's not, if you were in the decision-making role, what would you do to improve this situation immediately?
Immediately, I don't know that there's really a fix like this season. Okay. You have to look long term. I mean, this season is just like last season. It's kind of a foregone conclusion that they're not going to make the playoffs. And really, what they need to start doing is start thinking about selling off some of these older players that are around. And he's not an older player, but someone like Brandon Saad, or try to get rid of, try to get something for Eric Gustafson. Maybe, you think about, Corey Crawford, or, at the worst case scenario, maybe Duncan Keith, you can get something back for him, but you have to start jettisoning some of these older players so that you can bring in these younger players and be selective on what veterans you do keep around, because you can't. Jonathan Toews and Patrick Kane are going to be gone. Their contracts are up in 3 years. They could just walk out the door. So what are we planning for? Are we planning for, Jonathan Toews and Patrick Kane to be leading this team to the next level in Stanley Cup? Or is it Kirby Dach, Adam Boqvist, Dylan Strome, and Alex DeBrincat? I think it's, the DeBrincats and those guys should be taking them into the next level. And sometimes some of these guys got to go. It's just, it's a business. You have to get rid of some of these players, clean up these rosters. You can't hang on to these veterans forever because they're declining and they cost a lot of money. And that's going to really restrict what you can do with your roster.
Can I go with Jeff Osborne? He's from the Rink official. We're talking about Blackhawks hockey right here on Shawn and Maya in the morning. And you're right. I would say it. Are they going to trade and look for trade partners for Toews and or Kane? Because once that's done, then the white flag is in. Now it's just full rebuild. If you trade one, you better trade both.
Yeah,
if you trade one, you might as well trade both, and you can get a haul for both. You'll probably get more for the Kane Meister, but just because he's probably going to be the greatest American-born hockey player ever. But you can still get a heck of a lot back for Toews, and that could be the jump start that you need to move on to the next level, the next phase in the history of the Chicago Blackhawks.
Yeah, I mean, everyone should be on the table. It should be open. They should be open for business, for any offers, just to listen. But I really don't think you're going to see Patrick Kane or Jonathan Toews getting traded. I think, that would be kind of a PR nightmare for McDonough, and he's already suffered some PR nightmares. And, a lot of fans aren't happy with Stan Bowman, and they're not happy with the Jeremy Colliton thing. And these are really big, these would be generational trades to get rid of these players. And I don't know that John McDonough wants to pull a trigger on something that could turn into a PR nightmare, like when, Ed Belfour or Jeremy Roenick or, Chris Chelios were traded, and they didn't really get equal returns for any of those players. And that could very well happen again. So I don't think you're going to see them get traded, but that doesn't mean that they shouldn't be listening to offers, because you never know. There could be some crazy GM out there who just offers them the world. And, sometimes you just got to take a chance on something like that. But I think it's highly unlikely.
So if we're talking about, obviously, that everyone should be on the table in regards to this entertaining conversation, then what becomes the conversation with the coaching situation? Do you feel that Colliton is the long-term answer, or you really don't know? The verdict is still out on that. Kind of, what's your thoughts on that piece of the puzzle?
Yeah, I gave Jeremy Colliton about a year because, he's young and he was kind of thrown in, probably didn't expect to get that job as soon as he did. But he's kind of losing me a little bit. We're seeing, players making, a lot of mental mistakes that coaching should be able to help. And, just hearing whispers of, players not thinking that highly of Jeremy Colliton. You need a commanding presence, especially for young players. And he may relate to those players, and he may be a great assistant coach. But the great communicator. But I don't know that he's the long-term answer. I mean, I'm almost surprised that he's still with the team, and it's probably only because he's only been with them for a year. But much better coaches have been fired already.
I would definitely say that they couldn't even maybe get rid of him in the next year, because I think that is a bad look, considering how things ended with Coach Quinville, to then say, oh, well, after 2 years this is not working. I mean, people were frown upon that. Well, let me ask you a question, just a general NHL question. So last year there were 6 head coaches that were fired. This year there's already been 7. So in a season and a half, we looked at 13, coaching changes, pretty much almost half of the league. What does that indicate about where the NHL is going?
Well, hopefully it means that they're going to stop recycling old coaches and they're going to start, moving to that next level. But, the NHL is like an old boys network, and they just keep recycling these coaches all over the league. That's the easiest change to make in season, rather than, trading your whole roster or firing your GM mid-season or something like that. So I think that's kind of why it's happening. But, the Blackhawks have already made that change. They've got, they would have fired 2 coaches. And so you have to start looking bigger picture here. Stan Bowman, maybe he's not the guy. I was a big proponent of a lot of the moves that he made over the summer, but they're just not really working out. You might have to look at bringing in someone who can develop talent, because Stan Bowman does not develop talent. He has, made a couple of decent trades more recently, but he didn't draft extremely well. He didn't make deals extremely well. He was supposed to be able to navigate the salary cap. He's supposed to be the salary cap guru. But earlier this season, they had to play one player short because they couldn't navigate the salary cap. So what does he do that's that good that he's still around doing this stuff? Maybe it's time to bring in a guy who's really good at developing young players, because you're going to have to develop a lot of young players in these next coming years, and draft well. You can't strike out in the first round or middle first round, because let's say they finish and they're going to draft 12th this year. You're not getting a blue chip prospect at 12. You're going to get a guy that needs to be developed. So you need a GM and a system that develops players. Right now, they don't develop players through their system. They don't. It's either a player who's really good coming right out of the draft that can almost step into the lineup, or it's a guy who ends up getting traded somewhere else and never really sees his full potential. You need that guy that can develop them.
I'm sorry, I thought you were done. But that's like shooting yourself in the foot. Right? Why the hell wouldn't you, get people who fit your system? that doesn't make any sense to draft people. And I understand when you got top prospects and just superstars, and they can kind of coexist in or out of your system. They're still going to be good. But when you don't draft and develop in kids who fit your system, that doesn't make any sense at all.
No, not at all. It really doesn't. And it's perplexed me for a while that they, they were able to have, they had this, pot of wealth with Jonathan Toews and Keith and Seabrook and all these guys who were from the regime previous that did kind of come through the system. I mean, Kane and Hayes came right up, but Keith played in the minors. Seabrook played in the minors. Hjalmarsson played in the minors a little bit. They developed those players all through the system, and they're not developing players through the system that are becoming, top 6 players right now. They get guys that, maybe middle 6 at the most, don't really contribute real well. You got like Dylan Sakura, who's set in the system forever. He was supposed to be that, next young player that was going to come in behind DeBrincat. He hasn't, he had 1 goal in 40 games. That's not developing talent at all. Who else have they developed? Not really much of anything. And especially on defense, it was even worse on defense. They didn't develop anyone through their system. I think the most recent guy is, Dennis Gilbert.
That's a big part. That was one of the biggest issues for the Blackhawks was the defensemen, is that they were just young. Remember 2 years ago, they're young. They need, about 100 games under their belt for them to kind of get their legs under them. And in last year, they exceeded that 100 mark, 100 game mark, and nothing. We didn't see a huge improvement. We didn't see a drastic. You know what I mean? So, the development part is the issue that we're having with the Blackhawks. One of the issues we're having with the Blackhawks. If you can't develop, then you need to bring someone else in here who can develop young talent.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's what needs to happen because you're going to have a lot of young players coming through the system. You need to be able to get them through the system and at least a fraction of them, to be able to be solid NHL players, not guys you trade away after, 30 NHL games because you decided they're not what you needed them to be.
What about the player Philip Holmes? What much did you know about him that they end up, they initially agreed to part ways. He went on waivers. But it seemed like for a while there was talk thinking that he eventually could be a good fit, but yet he never made it up, obviously, to the NHL. Any thought about him, or was it just kind of a possibility, but it's not like they necessarily missed anything on not bringing him up?
Probably not. I mean, I don't know that he would have been necessarily any better than anyone that's on the roster right now, but he's an older player. I think he was like 28, something like that. So he was taking one last shot at trying to get on an NHL roster. And the Blackhawks just decided they would rather go young than bring in a 28-year-old guy who had never played in the NHL, really. And, he's not necessarily going to be your solution to anything. They have these young players. They're going to have Ian Mitchell coming out of, Denver University. Once his NCAA career is over, they're going to sign him to a contract. He's going to be another young defenseman who they're going to need to have space for. And one of the reasons why Henry Jokiharju got traded was they didn't have enough space for all these defensemen. So they traded one of them away, and here we are. So Holm was another guy. There's a log jam of defensemen in the AHL, and he just decided he wanted to go back to Europe because he wasn't getting, he wasn't going to make it to the NHL, and they weren't going to really do much with him. He had a 1-year contract, so he went back home.
Right.
Fine, I'm just going home.
But that's it.
Yep.
I'm done with you guys. I'm through with that one right there.
How did you feel about the Jokiharju situation? I really felt like there was something there. What was your thoughts about when he obviously left the Hawks?
Yeah, I kind of tweeted about this last night. I tried to give Alex Nylander a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. He had a high pedigree. He has, a lot of real raw talent, but it seems to be all between his ears. And he's just not turning out to be much of anything. And I don't know. From what I've heard is that maybe Jeremy Colliton did not like him, saw something in his game he did not like. But still, that being said, it would be really nice to have him in the system at this point in time. He's a first round draft pick, defenseman. He could probably be a decent two-way guy. He seems to be playing well in Buffalo. That just didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Alex Nylander's, all up and down the lineup. They're healthy scratching him all the time. I got to think that Henry Jokiharju would be providing more to this team than what Alex Nylander is providing to him right now.
Guys, that's Jeff Osborne. You can find him on Twitter at Puckett Hostel. And I don't know where your website's at, buddy.
Yeah, it's www.the-rink.com. You can find all of our great stuff there. We also have a podcast, which is the Blackhawks Hockey Rinkcast. You can find it on Twitter, on iTunes, on all of the favorite podcatchers.
Great stuff, buddy. I appreciate your time, man. Hopefully next time we talk to Hawks, we're playing much better. Fingers crossed.
Thanks a lot, man.
All right, buddy.